Let's shift from Queensland politics to federal politics now. A huge day tomorrow, of course, with the release of the government's mid-year budget update.
Yes, well, it's shaping up to be a big week for the federal government, even with the PM off on leave, in terms of the government's strategy for the years ahead. The migration strategy yesterday and the MYEFO budget statement tomorrow. There's been an interesting turn in terms of this decision to halve the net migration rate. The builders are blowing up. They won't have enough workers. This was at the centre of a question I had to New South Wales Premier Chris Minns on Sunday Agenda. I'm going to play you now what you said to me in September. Are you concerned about the rate and pace of migration at the moment?
I'm not. The reason for that is we desperately need people in the service industry and construction in particular, and the lack of them in the New South Wales economy is adding to inflation and, ironically enough, adding to the housing pressures. The Albanese government is looking at inbound immigration. A large number of them will be directed to the construction industry. I'm hoping that that will alleviate some of the housing pressure. All
right, that was a couple of months back. You weren't worried about 500,000 people coming into Australia then, are you now? Do you think the federal government might be undershooting this?
No, well, they weren't my words, but what I would say is, and I'll wait and see the announcement from the federal government tomorrow, but if they're making a decision about inbound student migration visas, that's very different to skilled migrants, particularly in the construction sector. And I don't think the federal government's making the point that skilled migrants coming in, working in construction to help us with the massive backlog when it comes to new builds is on the agenda.
So he changed his tune between Sundays, all black and white on Sundays, Chris Minns. Opposition Leader Peter Dutton was today able to say there would be a shortage of tradies. And on the other hand, he was saying that the government was being misleading about how many people were going to be arriving in the country, and it was still going to be more than its budget had forecast.
The government had the opportunity under the migration program review to allow more tradies to come in, as we've done in decades past, to try and meet that demand, because at the moment you can't build a house and you can't get a renovation done in a reasonable time at a reasonable cost because of the massive shortage of tradies in this country. So the government, in a single decision, is going to make it harder to find a tradie and more expensive to find a tradie. And we know that they're now projecting that there'll be 1.625 million people, 1,625,000 people, as opposed to 1.495 million people in the May budget. So how does Jim Chalmers look the Australian public in the eye and tell them a story about migration which is not true?
So too much migration but not enough tradies, says Peter Dutton. Well, he was also today able to target the government's seemingly slow actions in using the preventive detention orders they rushed through Parliament last week. And that, of course, is about this cohort of more than 140 asylum seekers who've been released by the government following a High Court decision.
The government has not yet formed the process for referring matters onto the court in relation to their preventative detention legislation, which again is quite remarkable, and it's going to result, sadly, tragically, in more people becoming victims of these criminals. If the government hasn't yet put together this law enforcement board and they don't yet have cases ready to go to court, they're not going to get there before Christmas.